kick off the recording and get stuck into it. Hope you enjoyed the tunes there. I was just saying that I really don't enjoy when you're sitting at the start of a webinar and it's just complete silence. So hopefully you enjoyed a bit of Wolfpack, and it's great to see so many people tune in and join us today. I would assume that most of you are back in the office or back in the home office from your holiday. So I hope everyone had a good break and is feeling energized and motivated to get into 2022. I'm not really, but I'm getting there. So thanks for joining our webinar today. We're talking implementing new tech in your practice in 2022. It's a really interesting topic and something that we could probably waffle on for days about, but we're really trying to keep it to being quite short and sharp, so probably 30 to 40 minutes with some questions throughout today. If you do have any questions for us as we go, please feel free to use the Q&A function within Zoom. I'd assume you all know what that is now. If you don't, I'm not sure what planet you've been living on, but please feel free to drop your experience in the chat or in the Q&A. We're more than happy to answer those questions as we go. Awesome. All right, well, without further ado, I just wanted to introduce my awesome co-host today, Amy, who is the director at Clarity Street, who I've known for a number of years now and has had a huge range of experience in the ecosystem. How long have you been working in the sort of Xero accounting ecosystem, Amy?
Oh, I think we're clocking up. We're just under about 13 odd years now. So okay, yeah, awesome. Yeah, started way back when in the accounting space when Xero first practiced what is now known as Xero Practice Manager. So back when it was called Workflow Max, before it was even purchased, I was in a practice that had implemented it. So yeah, had a fair amount of experience. So thank you for inviting me on to speak today.
No, absolute pleasure to have you here. And for those of you who aren't familiar, we've done a lot of work with Clarity Street, who have helped a number of our customers over the last couple of years with implementations, everything from Xero Practice Manager through to Practice Ignition and FYI Docs. And they've got this amazing sort of graphic with all of these different apps that all fit together and integrate. And Amy's an absolute expert in how that all fits together and how it works. And not only that, but also the change management process that sits behind the tech, which is what we're going to talk a little bit about today, because it's often the part that people stuff up. So very 100%. Glad to have you on here.
Thanks.
Awesome. So in terms of a brief agenda, we're going to focus on some of the common pitfalls that we've seen and what to avoid. And really, I'm going to shut up for most of this and hear from Amy's experience, having worked with hundreds of different firms. But we're then going to sort of drill down a little bit into how you can influence change as both an individual or a decision maker within your practice. And quite often we find that whether you're a manager or an accountant or a partner, someone's got this great idea, they've been to a conference, they're feeling motivated, they've sat in on a webinar, they absolutely love this piece of technology, but they struggle to get adoption across the practice. And so we're going to drill into some strategies on how you can actually get buy-in, some things to consider that you may not have considered before. Hopefully it's helpful to you. And then further to that, we'll sort of narrow down on how you can make sure your staff and clients are sort of bought in and engaged to this change management process. And then specifically talk a little bit about Xero's practice tools and some of the things to just watch out for there. We're seeing quite a lot of firms who are migrating off sort of legacy desktop-based systems, AE and the like, over to XPM. And we've kind of seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So hoping to share some of those insights with all of you today. But as I said, jump in the chat if you can and let us know where you're tuning in from today. We'd love to hear from as many of you as possible. Jump in the Q&A as well and ask any questions as we go. We won't actually have a specific Q&A time at the end. We'll just try and answer questions as they come up through the webinar. And because most of you are probably checking your emails right now, I'm going to hit you with a poll so that I can make sure that you're paying attention. Are you considering implementing new systems within the next 12 months in your practice? There are two options there. It's anonymous. We're not going to follow you up after this. Let us know if you're actively considering new systems within your firm or if you're all set, in which case I'm not sure why you'd be tuning into this webinar per se, but jump on that poll and I want all of you to vote. So jump off your emails and vote on this poll for us so we can get an idea.
I think whilst we're doing that, Ethan, one of the things that I was thinking of just then is something to consider when you are adopting tech in the next 12 months, if you are, because I'm hoping that you are actively considering it, is to remember that, 10% of the problems in any practice come from software, realistically. 90% are people and process related. So remember that when you are actually looking at new software and things like that, which we're obviously going to deep dive into more as we come along, but there is, it's a really large proportion of people and process that actually impacts the way a firm operates, when a lot of people tend to think that it's technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to end this poll and actually share the results with all of you so you can see where you sit in the pack. But about 75% of us on the call today are actively considering new systems for the year ahead.
Oh.
So that's pretty exciting. Hopefully that means that you're at the right webinar and you're going to get some great takeaways from our content today. Awesome. All right. So we thought just a little bit of context setting before we get into the meat of the content. And I guess what we've seen across working with over 5,000 practices now globally, some of the key trends that we've seen that's driving change among practices. We're specifically talking to accountants today, but it's very much around sort of three key focus areas. The first one being visibility over work in progress. So specifically job profitability, staff efficiency, turnaround time on your jobs, so you can understand where the bottlenecks are in your practice, which of your team need further training. This has been a huge theme for us and our customers over the last couple of years as we've been forced to work remote. And I think that's been a real limitation, Amy, I'm sure you'd say the same, of some of the legacy systems, is that it really doesn't cater for that way of remote work. And all of the water cooler chats or peeking over the shoulder of your colleagues to see what the status is on a job just doesn't happen as easily anymore. And it's been a real focus for practice owners that we've been speaking to. Has that been the same for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think if nothing else, remote desktop into, like RDP, that wasn't meant to be done on a day-and-day basis, 8 hours a day when you're all working remotely. That was for the odd random time that you can't be there. You needed to quickly jump in, do a little bit of work, maybe for an hour or two, every few weeks. I mean, sure, you can do that, but your systems aren't set up that way. And like, we actually helped a number of firms transition during the COVID period because of that, because they were just like, our system can't handle like the entire team remote desktoping into the server consistently. That's been a big challenge. And just workflow, I think, as well, is just with all of the additional compliance requirements that the government has thrown at every accounting firm throughout every state as well in Australia, especially over the last 2 years, just the additional load on work has just meant that your standard traditional compliance has been enough of a struggle. But all that extra additional, fees and grants and all the rest of that kind of stuff, that's really had, a really big impact on getting visibility and clarity over your workflow. So this is definitely what's trying to change.
Absolutely. And I think further to that, this sort of issue around scope creep and over-servicing clients has been a contested topic in the forums and groups if you're part of them on Facebook, but particularly around things like grant lodgements and, JobKeeper, job seeker, all that sort of stuff. Whether you charge, whether you don't charge for these services, is kind of up to you. But fundamentally, what we've seen is that accountants have done more work than ever, but they're not necessarily properly engaged for it. And so we've been speaking a lot with the Tax Practitioners Board, the legislative bodies that are in the space. And there is actually quite a risk to you as a practice if you don't get properly engaged to complete this work. Even things like, submitting clients to the ADO portal. There's a checkbox you've got to tick there, which you would just do without thinking. But there's actually terms from that you should be including in your engagement letter. And if you're using any cloud-based software, you're using Xero, potentially using Practice Ignition, you need to include those privacy terms and links out to those privacy policies within your engagement letter. And I'd hazard a guess that you've changed the tech that you've used since updating your engagement letter. And so it's really quite important that you actually get on top of exactly what it is that you're offering all of your clients. Make sure that you're properly engaged, that you're in scope, and that you're getting paid for all that additional work that you're doing, most importantly. And the last thing here, just about every practice we talk to at the moment is struggling to get staff. And I'd say that a number of you would be resonating with that on the call today. One thing that we've seen is that quite often there's the staff that are in the existing team potentially aren't deployed as effectively as they could be. So looking at what are some of our processes that are inefficient and broken that we could potentially improve with a piece of technology so that our team can focus more on serving clients and moving to that higher value work. And Amy, is that something that you've sort of seen as a result of some of the implementations you've done?
Yeah, and I'd also throw to that capacity component, which is, 75% of the callers here are wanting to to implement new technology, which is wonderful, because there is such a shortage of what we would classify as good quality employees out there in the market at the moment. What are you doing as a firm to attract potential new team members and employees? If your systems are outdated and old and you kind of like, is that really a good thing for an accountant to want to come and work at your practice if you actually haven't updated, you know, your systems, your processes and things like that? So I think that's also something to be really mindful of as well, is like, you know, it goes both ways. You might not be able to find them, but why would they want to come to you?
Yeah,
I know that's
it's
brutal,
a great,
but
yeah. And I had coffee this morning with a managing director at a practice that is a customer of ours, and we're just saying that, you know, flexibility for some of these firms is how you get to work at home every second Friday. It's like, you know, that's just expectation now. So
correct.
A lot of the stuff that benefit of what we've seen coming out of COVID is now become an expectation and a baseline. And exactly right. You know, you're not going to attract accountants to your practice if you're just punching out ITRs all day and you've got a shitty process. So it's a big part of it. Secondary to this, a real miss that we see before firms actually tackle the whole tech side of things is not actually quantifying the pain points that they're trying to solve. And what I mean by that is not actually understanding the impact of their current process on their business. So like, we've got a whole list of things there. It could be low value clients who are taking up too much time, your broken processes, whether it be onboarding, payments or whatever, disconnection of workflow and onboarding, disengaged staff, a broken review process, something that Amy added there, our directors or partners getting in the way if you're making change. But one thing that we've seen time and time again is that when you actually spend the time quantifying the impact that these bad processes are having on your practice, it makes it so much easier to present that business case internally to say, hey, we've got an issue where X% of our time is spent on this thing and it's really annoying and it's year in, year out. It's the same issue that we keep facing every year. By implementing this tech, which costs us $1,000 a month or whatever it is, we're going to impact this particular metric or these metrics by this percent. I think that sort of data-driven approach has really been missing, and it's the reason why a lot of implementations often fall down, particularly with bigger teams, because they just don't get the buy-in. Has that been consistent with what you've seen, Amy?
Yeah, definitely the data, but I also think that it's just actually asking the right questions. Sometimes it's really hard to get out of your own way, which we're going to talk about more, you know, as we move through this process. But sometimes it's really hard to actually take a moment to take a step back and look at your business with a bird's eye view, as opposed to being in your business and sort of going, well, this process feels like it's broken. Like, because most people, right, you know, we're all very intelligent human beings on this call. We all, you know, have a pretty good gut. Thanks. We all have a pretty good gut feel when something's not quite right. But do we ever challenge that? Do we ever take a moment and go, all right, this doesn't feel right, but why? I need to ask the right questions. I need to actually dig deeper. And I think that's, you know, from a Clarity Street perspective, that's why we always start, like when we start working with a client in our, you know, 12-month engagements, we always start with the discovery. Because if we don't know what's going on, then we can't obviously make the right recommendations to assist with the problems there. But when we ask those questions and we do the discovery, we get really deep in terms of the questions that we're asking. Like, you know, when we ask about what's your onboarding process or how do you handle the mail, for example, like it's little things like we'll actually literally make people step by step, like the mail. So, yeah, the mail arrives. How does a mail arrive? Backtrack. You know what I mean? Like, do you actually go and drive there and pick it up? Does it get delivered? Like, just, I know that sounds really kind of annoying, but when you really go through each step-by-step bit in the process, that's when you go, that's what we shouldn't be doing. That's kind of, that's what the bottleneck is essentially. So
yeah, absolutely. And quite often things can be almost symptomatic rather than actually being the cause of the issues as well. So I think one other note that we had here when we were catching up about the content was, you know, the client satisfaction is also something to consider in all of this as well. So how can you measure how good your client experience is? It's quite hard to measure, but, you know, we've seen that the firms that have been successful, particularly out of COVID, the firms that have grown 20, 30, 40%, yes, that's actually not lying. We have seen firms grow at almost double in the last couple of years. Yep. Client satisfaction is something that they're giving attention to, particularly at the moment where you've got a lot of folk kind of just shopping around. You know, they've got 10 different websites for 10 different accountants up. You know, they're sending in multiple inquiries. It's not everyone, sure, the value of referrals and stuff is still there, but we really believe that to attract and retain those clients that you want to work with, you do need to give attention to that client experience piece.
Yeah, we did a call last year, actually, one of our FOMO Fridays, and it was on this topic. And, there are some clients, like, every SaaS product out there, I mean, for those who are already using Practice Ignition, probably would have received a, would you promote, do you like, that kind of thing? Like, how do you feel about this piece of software? We've all received them from, SaaS products. And it's about being confident in your service enough, or being okay with receiving feedback, whichever way you want to look at this, that, ask for a net, launch a net promoter score type scenario and start asking your clients what their feedback is about what your service is, because that's a really good way of obviously tracking and measuring, the impact that you are having on your clients. But, exactly to that point, what is the impact of the changes that we're going to make, not only to my team internally, but also to my clients, especially if it's a client facing product that you're implementing.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. I think that's been really helpful to set some context. We're going to talk about common pitfalls. My favorite part, what gets in the way of getting shit done. And, this is something that, we're currently looking at in our business, always looking at in our business. It's something that we work with our customers on all the time. I think that we'd all agree that there are blockers and challenges, and they can become these huge mountains in your practice that are seemingly impossible to overcome. And 9 times out of 10, you can move somewhere else and they're going to have the same problem. So we'll talk about some of the common ones that we've seen, and really keen to get Amy's insight here, having worked with so many firms on the change management side, around what is stopping people from actually taking action, and what are the successful firms where it's actually working, what have they done that's different to the rest. So you've written here, Amy, get out of your own way, don't focus on the 1%. Could you elaborate on this? Because it's quite high level, but maybe if you could give us some examples on what you've seen within practice as well, to share with the listeners today.
Yeah, definitely. The 1%. So for all intents and purposes, the majority of the public practice accounting industry out there is literally conditioned to focus on finding the 1% anomaly. You are conditioned to find that 1% problem in a client's set of, numbers and books and that kind of stuff. So by nature of that fact, that tends to flow over into other aspects of the business. When you're implementing technology, when you're implementing change, it will never be 100% correct, ever. No ifs, no buts about it. And if you consistently focus on the 1% that is potentially not right, then you lose the ability to see what else is right. So 1% might not be right, sure, but that's 99% that is right. And that's something that I think sometimes, really blocks people from implementing decent software or decent changes, is that they're so fixated on the one thing that's not quite working right that they forget that 99% of the operation, or the product or the project or whatever is doing, is actually working really well. And I think that comes down to, if nothing else, trust. More than anything, is trust in your own ability, but also trust in the people that you have around you. Trust in, the fact that, you've put the correct processes and procedures in place, and that people are also people. We're humans. We're also not perfect creatures. So, we're never going to be 100% correct either. So again, I think the biggest thing to take out of the don't focus on the 1% is what I've, in that second point, focus on the majority, not the minority. So, Clarity Street's big fans of obviously Practice Ignition. It's part of our core app stack that we implement for clients. And, we're also very big advocates of the upfront pricing methodology and upfront payment, where possible, methodology as well. But we're also, not stupid, and understand that that's not going to work for every single client. But when accountants first see that, and when they first hear that, they're like, instantly they will go, oh, that's not going to work for this client. Oh, no, that's not going to work for this client. When it's like, well, it doesn't have to work for every single client. You want it to work for the majority of your clients, so that it frees up the capacity for you to spend the time on those bespoke clients that need to be handled in a bespoke way. So I think, if nothing else, when you're implementing, change software, that kind of stuff, focus on majority, not minority, because that's what's going to allow you to actually move forward with things. And also, don't overinvest in solving that problem for just one client. That 1%, if you spend so much time focusing on that, you just miss the bigger picture and you lose the efficiency gains, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we do see it time and time again, where whether it be just from my experience implementing Practice Ignition or implementing reporting and sort of advisory stuff for clients, if you buy the software and use it with 10, 15% of your clients, you will not see an ROI on it, you'll be going backwards. It'd almost be better to just not implement it at all if you're going to use it for such a small percentage. So these tools are kind of designed with scale in mind, and there's obviously limitations, as you've said, Amy. But again, I think it does come back to that whole client communication piece for a lot of it. Like, get in front of them and actually ask, hey, we're planning on changing this. This is the new process. Love to get your feedback, but this is the way that we're going. And like, we were just having a conversation before, which would surprise a lot of people, just around a firm, acquiring another firm, where they did a whole bunch of client handovers virtually, and it was absolutely fine. 50 meetings via Zoom it was. So, like, I think it's that, it's the bigger picture thing. But as you've said, accountants are awesome at finding the anomaly and calling it out. So the second thing here we've got is just thinking outside your perspective. I added this one in. We actually had a webinar with Xero's head of change management a year and a half ago or so. And the biggest takeaway from that for me was, have we actually thought about what's important to the different people within our practice? So whether you're a practice manager, you're a client manager, you're a senior, intermediate, junior accountant, you're a partner, a director, each of these different roles, they've got different things that are important to them within the practice. And also that's down to an individual level as well. If someone's working 3 days a week and playing golf 2 days a week, they're probably not going to be interested in going hard on reinventing the business. But just that consideration of, in the initial stages of looking at a new piece of tech, are you addressing all of those stakeholder concerns or requests, or addressing what's important to everyone as part of that sort of discovery? And when you're pitching it internally, again, it's a thing that we see hold up or get in the way of change time and time again, is that one person in the firm loves the idea of this new piece of tech. They want to get it rolling. They might use it with their clients, or one partner's using it with their clients, but they've failed to actually get any sort of deeper penetration across the business. And I think it's largely due to this, not managing expectations up front. But yeah, love to hear your thoughts on this as well, Amy.
Yeah, I think this also, like that second point in there, is also really important as well, around how will it impact the clients. Like, especially when, there are a lot of forward-thinking accountants on this call right now, in terms of not only are they wanting to implement tech for their business, like as in for your own businesses right now, but you're also considering implementing tech for clients. And I think it's something to be conscious of, that just because implementing Xero, hypothetically speaking, is going to make your life easier to do their accounting and their bookwork, is that actually the right move for that client? Does Xero, hypothetically speaking, factor in and cater for the client's needs in terms of how they would operationally run their business? Because just because it makes your life easy to do their books, which is great when you do it once a year, or quarterly when you have to do their BAS and that kind of thing, that's wonderful, but they have to live with that piece of software every day to run their business. Likewise, when you're in your own business, you want to make sure that the entire team is actually bought into what you're implementing for the particular business, because they have to use it pretty much 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, give or take. So make sure it actually works, and make sure that you've considered everybody's, feelings and, concerns or issues with the software. You're never going to get everybody 100% loving it. But for the most part, I think if you can set up the expectations that we're trialing this to begin with, this is the view, this is the strategy that we want to adopt moving forward. This is why we're planning on doing this, because this is something that I've noticed as well in the industry. We had a good conversation with one of the industry competitors to Xero recently. And one of the things that they don't necessarily do well is be transparent about their strategy. And if I can give you anything about, change management, and we will talk, I think one of the slides covers this, but, getting the buy-in from your other team members is one thing, but also having a vision and a strategy as to what you're trying to achieve really goes a long way with allowing that buy-in to happen. It allows people, a space to voice concerns and things like that. You take them on board, you listen, and then, you move on, basically. I'm listening to a great book at the moment called Radical Candor by Denise Scott. No, that's not her name. It's all right. Radical Candor. I'll come back with that one. And it's all about how you communicate with your team and how you have, good conversations. And that's what this is. The impacting change thing is being able to communicate clearly with your team, with your clients, to understand what, their reservations are and if it is the right fit moving forward.
Yeah, awesome. Pauline said, make it usable for your bookkeeper.
Thank you, Ben. Kim Scott.
They're the ones.
Thank you, Ben. Somebody's just mentioned that. Kim Scott, radical candor, appreciate it. Cheers.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great, Amy. And I think yeah, again, it's just something that we see hold up or get in the way of progress time and time again, where you've failed to get that buy-in at an early stage. One thing that stood out to me as you were talking there, Amy, actually our head of accounting, Beck Mahalik, has sort of shared a lot on this, but in terms of engaging your team and giving ownership to your team, it's actually quite helpful to bring people in as early as possible on this journey. So, hey, we've got this issue within the practice we're looking to solve this year. This particular bottleneck's been plaguing us for some time. Actually get some of your junior team members involved in doing the scoping and the discovery as well, and kind of get that buy-in from the early stage rather than coming in at the very end with at 99% complete and trying to roll it out. That always has a huge impact on people when people feel like they've had input in making this happen. Their likelihood of actually rolling it out and sticking with it is so much higher.
You know what, Ethan, that's a really good point. Can I be honest with you? If I hadn't have cut my teeth in a very forward-thinking firm and been a junior employee at a firm many moons ago, I probably wouldn't be running Clarity Street right now, because that's exactly how I got my starting point within this industry was, forward-thinking partners saw a piece of software, kind of liked it, didn't necessarily have the time to do the deep investigative work to see if it worked, picked me and went, hey, have a look at this. And I went, ooh, new toy. And I came back with all the different, pros, cons, all the rest of that kind of stuff. And that's what, and here is the progression and the transition that's happened, basically. So it's a fun place to be. Yeah,
awesome. So our next point is, just because it is doesn't mean it should be. And Amy, I'm going to throw to you on this one, but again, something we just see all the time is that the firms that are out there, or say you're going to a conference or a virtual conference nowadays, you've got your process that's been set in stone that you've been doing for 20 or 30 years, and you're looking for a piece of technology that's going to solve a problem according to your current process. But again, we do see so often that people fail to kind of step back and look at the process on the whole, not trying to find a piece of tech to adapt to their way of doing things, but fail to step back and say, actually, there's probably a better way we can be going about this whole process, and the tech's going to work better with that. Sure, every technology vendor is going to have their process that they recommend that works best with their piece of tech. That's a given. But I think this is a tripping point for many firms. So I'd love to hear your insight on this as well.
Yeah, I think far too often accounting practices, or just people in general, but we're obviously in the accounting industry. So the accounting industry focus too much on solving one portion of a problem rather than looking at the bigger picture of what's actually going on. So for example, I need a new practice management piece of software because I don't want to have to use my server anymore. Great. Heads up, newsflash, new software equals new processes and procedures, by literal nature of the fact that you won't be able to click on the same buttons anymore when you put the new piece of software in. Like, you literally can't do the same thing anymore. So with that in mind, this is the perfect opportunity to go, well, if my software is going to be different, that does mean that I need to do a different process. What is my current process? How can I change what I'm doing? Do I need to change it? Because there is some things that don't necessarily need to change. Fair point. There aren't, you don't have to change literally everything. But equally saying that, if you are going to change software, if you are going to look at adopting, and changing from, a server-based application to a cloud-based application, that means that it's new. It means that there is new software, new processes that are, going to be related to that. So I think it kind of says it all. Just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean that you need to do it that way moving forward. Moving from time cost billing, because this is an easy one to pick on, I'm sorry, but we've said this until the cows come home, but moving from time cost billing to fixed price upfront pricing, whichever way that looks, however you slice and dice that, that's a big change. But just because you've always done it the old way doesn't mean that you need to continue doing that the new way. Just because you've always had face-to-face meetings with your clients because they've always come into your office doesn't mean that you can't now have a Zoom call with them. Same sort of thing, same sort of theory, right? Like, it's just about thinking outside the square a little bit and going, well, what's not working? Here's the problem that I'm trying to solve, but what other things does that impact? And therefore, does it need to be that way anymore, essentially?
Yep. Absolutely. And Debbie's just chimed in there as well. Even just cloud software is an ongoing process of evaluating current process against the updates. Yep, that's right. Because these software applications will make. Speaking from experience at Practice Ignition, the amount of changes that we make every year that will constitute a change in your process as well, and people fail to keep up to date with that too. So it's a really good point. The last one here, we had on the 4 common pitfalls, was just not having a backup or a fallback plan as well. And again, I hate to go back to the fees thing, but even firms that kind of move over to fixed pricing and they just throw timesheets straight out the window because they're sick of dealing with it, and then get total loss of visibility across their job profitability in the practice. It's going to work, sure, for the majority. You're trying to solve problems for the majority, but what is the backup plan if it's not going to solve for a particular client? And then you've got a hot tip there as well, Amy. However long you think it will take, double it and then double it again for implementation and adoption, which I think is probably pretty accurate.
Yeah. Just to touch on the timesheet thing, for those that don't want to do timesheets anymore, you kind of still need to do it to work out your profitability and efficiency. You may not need them to charge anymore, but you still need them. Sorry to burst anybody's bubble. But yes, the backup plan, I think you do need to, like that. I mean, it says it for itself on the slide there. It's just about, who will you contact for help? Are there people in support? Do you have the right team members in place? Those kinds of things. Like, have you actually got the right amount of capacity to implement change? Do you have the right team members to do it? There's never the perfect time to do change. Just if you're waiting for the perfect time to make change, it's never going to come. Sometimes you do have to rip the Band-Aid off, but you also do have to think logically about the timing of things as well. Yeah,
awesome. Cool. We're going to move into influencing change as an individual or a leader, and some common quotes that we hear both at the partner or director level and then also within staff within the practice as well. And again, Amy, I'm sure you've heard these quotes a million times when you're working with practices as well, and you go in and do your discovery. So keen to get your first-hand experience here, but probably the 4 main things we see from partners who are wanting to influence change and can't get it done is again, we can't get buy-in. It's too hard to change my processes. My staff won't get on board. The one we hear all the time, young staff aren't loyal. They won't do the hard yards, whatever that means. My clients will never adopt this as well. I mean, just love to get your thoughts broadly on this sort of mindset. If anyone's not read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, it's really good for like thinking about a growth mindset versus fixed mindset around all this sort of stuff. But these are just classic comments that we get all the time. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Amy.
3 out of the 4 comments and are all very individually centric, if you think about it. So it's I can't, my. Do you know what I mean? That's your first problem, is that you're only thinking about you in those comments. You're not thinking about the broader picture of everyone else that this impacts. And that's the challenge, is getting people to buy into it. But the first step in that is including other people into it, helping them be a part of the process. So my clients will never adopt this. Have you asked them? Have you asked for feedback? Have you explained to them and given them a strategy and told them the reason why? If you haven't done any of those things and you're still saying that, then try all those things first. And then, because I can guarantee you the changes when you ask a client, 99% of clients, when you want to make a positive change and you come to them with a positive change, will go, okay, that's great. There's very few that will push back, And if they do push back, are they really your client? I know that sounds a bit brutal, but I don't feel like there's many accounting practices out there at the moment that aren't full to capacity. Most accounting practices have got so much capacity, they don't know what to do with it. Like, they've got so many clients basically. So I can't get buy-in from other partners. Again, I'm going to bring that back to, you need to have a conversation with them. You need to have some courageous conversations with your fellow partners and help them understand why you think this is right, but equally understand why they may not be as supportive as you would hope and like them to be. Most of the time, other partners don't buy in is because they feel threatened. So if you can help them feel comfortable, and it's not threatened because you're going to take their job, that's not it. It's threatened because they don't feel like they're the king of their own castle anymore. So they don't feel like they are that person that is fully in charge and they know all the knowledge, because that's what their role has always been. Being a director or a partner in a firm, typically speaking, has always been, I know everything about the business, I know everything about the clients. And if you're going to, change something and implement change, all of a sudden they don't know about that thing. And that's a scary thing for people that have been in a position of kind of power, so to speak. So I think it's a lot of it is about having courageous conversations and, coming with a genuine open heart for wanting to change and showing them why you think it's so important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one point that we had here when we were talking about it was, there's a lot of generally a lot of insecurity, particularly if you've spent a decade or more, using a particular tool, or you've gotten so familiar with the process that you're an expert in it. A lot of this insecurity just comes from a lack of confidence. And so half of the job is just instilling that confidence that, hey, we're not going to get it all right. That's okay. There's going to be mistakes. Don't expect us to get 100% right from the get-go, but we're changing it for these reasons. Over this, medium-term time period, we're going to see this sort of impact. Leslie said that she's also had this issue, commonly resistance around money and implementation, money and training, down production time, and so on. And that comes back to that whole thing, like, are you going to move slow to move faster? And sometimes you've just got to do that.
I think as well, just on that point, the money thing, is we actually have a cute little ROI calculator that helps show the cost of what your inefficiencies are with the current way of doing things at the moment that we take our potential clients through, which helps clearly identify how much they're missing out on, which therefore, when they see that, they go, okay, well, if I'm missing out on that potential, implementing doesn't seem to be as much of a cost to me because they can see the rewards at the end. But again, I mean, it's accountants, they're focused on money.
Yeah. And it comes back to what's important to each of the stakeholders that you're working with and communicating accordingly. If the partner's, comfortable making his wage and working 4 days a week and whatever it is, it's like, well, we're improving this process because it's going to increase the value of the firm. It's going to improve our efficiency. It's going to be more likely that someone's going to come along and pay a good price for the clients at some point. So, I mean, there's sort of those things to consider that are just outside the focusing on the cost. So influencing change as an individual, we get a lot of these questions as well. If I'm not in a position of power or a manager or a partner, how can I actually mandate change? Not getting buy-in, finding it too hard to get buy-in, progression for me. And we won't spend too long on this because I think we've covered most of it already. But the big thing that we see here is that lack of putting a test case in front of the partners and the leadership team to say, hey, let's just trial it with a handful of clients that are potentially more progressive than some of our other ones. And let's just see the impact. So we'll get some early feedback. We'll see if it works. We'll try and quantify the impact and then present that with your findings to the rest of the team, rather than, hey, I've got a really good gut feeling that this thing's going to be so much better because I got an awesome demo from a sales rep. This is the tangible impact that this is going to have, and we've tested it with this handful of clients. And just on the last point there, with no progression, as you've mentioned just earlier, Amy, I think that if you put your hand up and put your foot forward and all those cliches to actually go out and try and make the change yourself, you can create your own progression. By doing that and become a really valuable member of the practice. So have you got anything to add on this point, Amy?
Yeah, just briefly, like obviously, I mean, it's twofold. In the previous slide, the partners were concerned that there's no stability in the team, the young team members, and they don't want to stick around. And then on this slide, there's no progression for me. And at some point, both the younger team members and the older team members have to find a middle ground, realistically, to work together from a progression perspective. There needs to be a trust element there. But I think there's no progression for me. There's never no progression for you. You can always grow as an individual. You can always learn new technical skills. Technical will only take you so far, but as an individual, as a human being, you can always do personal development, which will therefore help you see your role and expand in your role in a completely different light. But at the end of the day, it's not the right fit for you. It's not the right fit. But ultimately, I would challenge anyone who is considering that their role in their firm is not quite right for them right now, is to challenge yourselves and go, why is it? Is it because of everybody else? Or is it actually because you're not taking a good hard look at yourself and your own skills and your own development that needs to happen? Because if things are bad here and they've been bad at the last place, they're going to be bad at the next place. So unless you fix your own problems, you're just going to keep on repeating this cycle.
Absolutely. Awesome. hopefully that's been helpful for all of you. But a couple of quick tips, just looking at change management here, bringing a team along on the journey. The biggest point I want to make here is that inclusion and education piece are really the two core pillars behind successful implementation. Getting your team involved early, making sure they're educated, making sure you've taken the time to address concerns. And that doesn't mean having an open slather roundtable for every meeting where everyone airs their dirty laundry. It's have you taken the time to map out what the key points of importance are for each of those stakeholder groups, and have you addressed those properly. Ensure your team are equipped with the right level of training. Again, another thing that we see is like one person wants to be the expert at this new piece of tech, so they're doing all the training, the demo, the onboarding and stuff, and failing to bring in the broader team. Again, that's a huge miss, because you're not actually getting that buy-in from people if you're the one who's controlling all the information. Just as the same frustrations you would have had with the partner that's become you, where you're bottlenecking all of that information. So that's a key thing that we really see as a key part of success for getting it right. Making sure there's a well-defined exit plan for the legacy technology. Again, another huge myths that we see time and time again. Don't just can it. Have a phased rollout, have contingency plans, all that sort of stuff, and then hold people accountable and set some internal metrics based on those bottlenecks that you quantified earlier on in the piece.
We actually have
anything we're missing there?
So I was just going to say, just on that second last point, we actually have probably the opposite issue, where instead of them just turning off the old legacy software and just going, be done, we have the opposite, where we're like, please remove access to your team so they stop using the old legacy stuff. So that's also like, it's point in case of you need to set a date, basically. When things will be turned off.
A D-Day. That sounds good. All right. Moving to Xero's practice tools, a couple of things to watch out for, and I guess some insight from what we've seen on why firms are moving this way. It very much comes back to visibility over job turnaround time and staff efficiency. And, we all love the reporting that you get out of XPM because it's fantastic, right? We've seen a lot of these practice apps start to really fill in some of the gaps in Xero's practice suite. And what I mean by that is when you've got some of those key pillar apps that are in place integrating with Xero Practice Manager, you can actually get some really efficient and really accurate reporting out of the platform. You've just got to do it right. And unfortunately, at the moment, that's been the exception to the rule from what we've seen, over the last couple of years. But now that we're starting to see maturity across tools like FYI Docs, which gives you that level of job automation and workflow, obviously for Practice Ignition, a shameless plug here for the automation of invoicing and the back-end stuff on accounts receivable, corporate compliance, all that sort of stuff. You can really get these systems working quite well together. And we've seen some really amazing impacts from firms that have got this right. But most importantly, it's really driven by that visibility. So even just working off a single ledger, the ability to work remotely, doing away with multiple versions of software that are server hosted in favor of getting that real-time data that's syncing through, both for clients and for the practice. Anything else that you've seen here, Amy, with your clients?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But the single client list is probably the greatest one when you're moving to, cloud-based practice tools, is trying to reduce the number of different separate databases. You're moving from, if it's server-based, it's one database realistically because it's one piece of software, generally speaking. And then you move to cloud-based and it is different client lists. So making sure that it's connected in the right way is really pivotal to it being clean and keeping the integrity of your data.
Absolutely. And you've got a couple of points here just on the key things to sort of consider when you're looking at, maybe you're already using Xero's practice tools and you just need to optimize it, or you're looking at migrating over. The point that I really like here is that the data integrity is critical. Does your client data actually match in the ACO and ASIC portals? Does it match within Xero Practice Manager? Does it match in the tools that we've got connected to Xero Practice Manager? Because a lot of these things sync client lists, and if you get it wrong, it's just a multiplication of issues. How do you go about, is this something early on in the piece, Amy, that you work with firms on?
Yeah, 100%. So I wouldn't be doing Clarity if I had $1 for every double up or duplicate client that I have cleaned up in clients' files. But when we start working with clients, their database, i.e. their Xero Practice Manager or their software that they're transitioning from and to, that is the first piece that we will always do, because if your Xero Practice Manager database is not clean and consistent, then every other application that it connects to is going to have concerns and issues, essentially. So, you know, making sure that what's in your database matches what's in the ATO portal it's huge. Like, data integrity is the amount of time that is wasted by having missing information, missing email addresses, wrong details, all the rest of that kind of stuff. Again, we have a little ROI calculator, shameless plug. We can tell you how much it's costing you as a firm, basically. But I think the other thing on that page there is there's always a trade-off. Literally, whenever you move to any piece of software, no one piece of software will do every single thing for you. Just no ifs, no buts about it. So knowing that when you move to Xero Practice Manager, there will always be a trade-off in terms of the way that you set things up. There are different thought processes around, do you set up one job that's open for the entire year versus do you open and close jobs as and when you have to do a piece of compliance work, set start dates, due dates, that kind of stuff. Whichever way you go about it, there is a trade-off. Neither is right or wrong. It depends on what you as a practice want. So if you want more day-to-day workflow visibility, start dates, due dates, what's overdue, those kinds of things, then having multiple jobs is a better way to go. If you are more focused on getting the financial, reporting from a client base or a per job base based on WIP and things like that, then having one job open for the entire year might be the right way to go. We have a preference, but it's what's more important to you as a business, but you need to understand that there is always a trade-off and no one way of doing things will be the right solution for you. So you have to be open to the fact that things aren't going to always be 100% the way that you want them to. And that last point, where does your client lifecycle start? Well, it's a contentious issue. Ethan. Just good. Like, given that we're on a call with practicing at the moment.
That's right. For the sake of time, we'll move on. Funnily enough, to where Practice Ignition fits in. Funnily enough, that this slide ties really well into the last one. But just to give folks some context for those of you who aren't using Practice Ignition, and I've seen there are a bunch of our customers on this call, so it's great to be connected with you. But for those who haven't heard of our solution before, it is a client engagement and commerce platform for accountants and bookkeepers. It's been specifically designed out of an accounting firm to solve a lot of these problems that we've talked about today, being a single source of truth for your client engagements. And we automate everything from digital proposals and engagement letters through to payment authorities and collections. We deploy the jobs and workflow into XPM or Carbon or Kivio and automate the invoicing out of the back of it as well. But the key thing here that I wanted to focus on today is actually just some of our obligations around the client engagements piece, which is what we talked about at the start of this call. What are some of the reasons for people moving tech? And a large part of that is around managing scope creep and getting more tighter on your client engagements. And so both the Professional Standards and the Tax Practitioners Board do recommend at least annual engagements with clients, outlining the scope of services for each entity. I know Amy's a big fan of engaging entities separately and not bundling everyone in a broad generic group engagement, which is a real pain in the... Yeah, exactly. And the reality is that we can totally understand why accountants have been lazy with this process to date, because the process sucks to manually update a Word doc or a PDF and keep it updated every year. So it's exactly why we built Practice Ignition. Over the last 2 years, we've partnered with CPA, with CA, with IPA. We're actually endorsed by all three of them now to provide those relevant industry templates within our product. And so that means you can log in, get started with an industry template within a matter of minutes and send out all those updated engagements to your clients. And you can create things like firm-wide templates for specific services or packages that you offer and all that sort of gear. So it's a huge time saver, not only on the compliance side of your engagements, but also providing that premium client experience that we've talked about. There's a lot of crossover in this webinar, funnily enough, and then also automating that flow of data into Xero Practice Manager and Xero and Intuit products. So I've got a link to a reference there that we can share out in the slide deck, which is an article from the TPB explaining a bit more about that for those of you who are interested. Why they're important, again, Amy, feel free to chime in here, but having a robust engagement strategy goes a long way to reducing scope creep and eliminating debtors. If you're upfront about exactly what's included and what the clients are paying for, it really does have a huge impact. And we've seen really significant, debtor reduction and these sort of issues completely eliminated within firms that have implemented PI. The case studies are there. All you have to do is log on to the Xero reviews and just read some of them. It is really quite amazing what people will share unprompted. So we really think that it's key to fostering trust with your clients. It gives your clients confidence around your pricing, but most importantly, it gives you clarity around exactly what your clients are engaged for and what they're paying for. Amy, is that something you've seen? I assume it is, considering you recommend
definitely.
PR to your clients.
Definitely. I think the one for me is that third point: foster trust through transparency. You couldn't have said it better. Just be transparent about what you're actually doing. There's no ambiguity that way.
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. I'm not going to go through this, but ultimately, if you are using the Xero suite or any of those cloud-based practice management tools, there's payment collection, invoicing, and job deployment without the chase. And to get it all set up, we have a really robust onboarding, training, and support process here. You can see all of these meetings that we've got mapped out, where we actually hold you and your team accountable to what you've said you want to do, which is, again, everything we've been talking about today by way of getting buy-in across your team, making sure the right people are involved, and you've actually got a human point of contact who's in your time zone that you can pick up the phone and call to get on a call with your broader team and either do training or support or any of those sort of things. So if anyone is interested, we'll launch a poll in a few minutes to see if you would like us to reach out and share more. Amy's also got a bit of a roadmap here in terms of how Clarity Street approach things. If you're keen to share on this for a minute or two.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, sorry, I'll be brief. So where possible, we can do standalone implementations for standalone products where we need to, 100% we can. But what we typically like to do and where we work with clients the best is when we work with them over a 12-month period. We will always start with the discovery, as I said. We will then implement or health check, depending on what you need. So we do have a core application stack for best practice. So, you know, phase 2 is basically implementing anything that you don't have that's going to enhance your overall practice, and health checking, review, repair, retraining you on what you do have that may not be working to the best of your ability, essentially. And then we obviously have, in the last little step there, is helping you master those tools. Is we have a range of different support things, which is, you know, dedicated client success. We have our Clarity Assist portal, which is all about processes and procedures. We have weekly Clarity calls, which is a live call on how you use a piece of software and how you do this particular process. Today's one on Thursday was all about ATO Smart Docs, for example. And then we also have Clarity courses, which we've built for all of our applications. So it's self-paced learning for you and the team, which allows you to obviously learn all the basics of how the software works. So when we do catch up with you, we have really good, comfortable, confident, robust conversations about practical things that are going on within your firm. So, you know, we're here to help you change. We help with two types of clients, generally speaking, which are those that are completely new to moving to cloud, and those that have already adopted but don't feel like they're getting the right, you know, output from the software, basically. And so we do a lot of it. It's not just software. It's a lot of it is process, procedures, change management more than anything.
Awesome. And yeah, personally, I've heard nothing but good feedback from our customers who have worked with Amy. So we definitely recommend that. We've had some really good questions and sort of engagement in the chat as well. So thanks to all of you who have jumped in there. If you would like us to reach out with more resources, we're going to be sending out the recording, the slides. We'll be sending out a bit of a white paper and workbook following this session as well. So if you would like us to get in touch around implementation, or if you'd like to speak to Amy, and have sort of an obligation consultation, or if you'd like to speak with Practice Ignition, jump in and respond on that poll just so we can prioritize. You know, we don't have the capacity to reach out to, you know, 200 people. So jump in on that poll and please respond if that's something that's of interest to you so we can prioritize getting back to you quickly. But otherwise, I really hope that the webinar was helpful today and you resonated with some of what we were sharing. We'd really love to get your feedback as well, whether that's in the chat, whether you can respond to us via email. We realize everyone's really busy at the moment and kind of gotten straight stuck into 22. So appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to join us. And again, Amy, thanks so much for sharing your insight on the webinar today. It was a great chat.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really good. Sorry we went a bit over, everyone. We talk
all
lots.
Good. We did say it was going to be an hour. Fantastic. All right. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll be signing off in a minute or so. So if you have any last minute questions, drop them into the chat. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your week. Hope you're all staying safe and well, and we'll hopefully see you on another webinar in the near future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Bye.
See you, Amy. Bye.